This episode of Loose Women, the podcast, does contain some swearing and adult themes. I had looked forward all of my life to my mum and dad seeing my firstborn, and I just felt wrong. I lost, which is what happens with clinical or major depressive disorder, they call it now, no matter what the origins, I lost the ability to love my child.
I remember I had a friend who was pregnant at the same time, and I felt deep shame that she got to be pregnant and I wasn't.
Shame,
I felt like it was a failure on my behalf. I delivered Coco out of our surrogate with me, with my own hands, looking at another woman who's sharing the most beautiful journey you can, in a true sisterhood, motherhood moment that is so powerful.
When you met Rob,
yeah,
how much did you know about his life?
All I know is the friend that was setting us up, he said, listen, the only thing I'll say is Rob's kind of off the wagon.
Hello and welcome to our Loose Women podcast. The gorgeous Ayda Williams and me have the honour of bringing you the very, very, very first one. And we are fresh from doing our Loose Women Oscars show. So we managed to get our frocks off.
We're still wearing our jewels, which I feel is
still
the most
got
important
our jewels.
bit.
I had to take the bra off because
it was cruel.
It had to be tight to keep up my, boobs, which are around my ears. But why a podcast, you say? Well, why not? Everybody else is doing one. And we thought that what a wonderful way to celebrate our 25th anniversary. And of course, we're just ahead of International Women's Day. So we're going to do some topics. There'll be some opinion-led bits, but we're going to be a bit more... We're going to be a bit more loose.
Right?
And
can we say bad words?
We can say some bad words, but we're not allowed to say
that word.
That word.
The one that's on my socks.
The one that's on your socks. But we can be a little bit looser. Okay. And we can talk to each other about things that maybe we either don't have time to cover on the show or just because we're nosy.
Yes.
And we
more
want
juicy.
More juicy.
I think we should bring the
basically.
Juice, right?
So now we're going to talk motherhood and parenting.
Well, I am very excited that we're talking about this because I, like a lot of moms, are interested to know, apparently 1 in 10 mothers report struggling to bond with their baby. Is this something that you worried about?
Well, it's what happened, but it wasn't what I worried about. So I don't know if you ever know about the origins of what became subsequent episodes of clinical depression. Mattie's 36 in April, so this is a long time ago. I was the most, when you talk about people who bloom in pregnancy, I was that person. I loved being pregnant. Even when I was getting the indigestion and the swollen feet, I loved being pregnant. And I was the typical blooming mum. My hair was great. My skin was great. I had this kind of happy hormone raging in me. And I loved every minute of it. So I was the mum that all my friends used to say, especially my gay friends. I was going to push this little bugger out.
You just pop him out.
And my friend used to say, hand it to the man who delivers the yellow pages that we used to have in those days, which was like a sort of, yellow pages. Yeah. And then I would be off at a nightclub. That's what everybody used to laugh and joke about. What happened was I had a 42-hour labour, which was very unpleasant. I was going to a natural childbirth hospital, which I didn't intend to, but I just found myself there, and I was
did it naturally?
Shouting, "Hit me over the head with a spike mallet!"
No drugs.
They wouldn't give me it. They kept going. At the time when they were talking to me before childbirth, I said, I will be allowed pain relief if I want it. And they said, Mrs. Healy, as I was at the time, Mrs. Healy, we're not in the Victorian times. Of course you will. Fast forward to hit me over the head with a spike mallet. Anyway, eventually, after 42 hours, I give birth and everything is fine. And I have a healthy child and he's beautiful. And my parents thought I was having a girl and it was a boy. And it was just all a wonderful time. And 5 days later, when we left the hospital, and I had been and I immediately bonded with him, okay? I loved this child. He was a whingy child. I didn't realise because he wasn't getting enough milk. I wanted to breastfeed. 5 days later, they said I could go home. And they said I'd been a very unanxious mum. I was the only mum in the hospital who didn't pull the anxiety cord, blah, blah, blah.
I definitely pulled the anxiety cord.
I didn't pull the anxiety cord. And we got back. We were living in North London, Tim and I. And it was the weirdest thing. I knew about the baby blues, and everyone told me I would have the baby blues. And we walked in the flat, and everything was there about all the cards and the flowers. And everyone I opened, I was over emotional. I was like this, and I'm thinking, it's the baby blues. Everyone said that anyway. I've got to try and précis this story. But my mum and dad came down, and I had looked forward all of my life to my mum and dad seeing my firstborn. And I just felt wrong. Oh. Yeah. And I went to bed, and I was going through the motions of smiling, and I went to bed that night, and I had the first panic attack I'd ever had in my entire life. From nowhere, Ayda. It wasn't because I was anxious. It was from nowhere. Oof. And when I woke up from maybe a 2-hour sleep, I had gone to bed with full breastfeeding boobs, and I woke up with spaniel's ears. All of my milk had gone. The whole lactation process had stopped. No. And the depression set in. This blackness rose from the bottom, and apparently I was on the verge of a puerperal psychosis. So I was between postnatal depression and puerperal psychosis. Oof. So I was in and out of lucidity as to who is this child. Mum found me trying to crawl out the window in the lounge. Oh, God. Tim and Dad had gone out to play golf, came round, then the medics were round my bed, and the depression set in. And I lost, which is what happens with clinical or major depressive disorder, they call it now, no matter what the origins, I lost the ability to love my child. Oof. And I couldn't love anything. I felt nothing. Oof. And Matty wrote a song years later with an adult view of my illness. And it's on one of his albums, I can't remember which, and it's called She Lays Down. And it's called She Lays Down because I told him when he was an adult, he wasn't aware of it as a child, Mummy was just poorly, that I used to lie down with him and pray. I'm not religious, but pray to whatever, to love my child. Mm. And the first thing that happens when I go into an episode, I can feel the blackness rising, and it's like the colour goes out of my life and I lose all emotion. Oh. And when you have this little baby, so my mum was incredible because she came down to see her grandchild and then go back to work. She worked with the mentally ill, and ironically in a hospital in the northeast. She had to take weeks of unpaid work to be with me.
And sorry to interrupt, but had you ever experienced...
Never one day.
Wow.
Never one day of psychiatric illness. Never one. To me, depression was when you didn't get a job, when somebody died. All of the reasons when people go, I'm really depressed. And I never say, you don't mean you're depressed. You know, I understand when people use that because it's the only reference that you have.
Yeah, of course.
But when you have clinical depression,
it's a different
you know the difference. Beast. And I got a real childlike need for my mom. And I got an incredible, which I then found subsequently is a very common side effect of postnatal depression, never talked about enough. And my mum had to sit by my bed, I was 31, and stroke my hand, and I'd go, but do you love him more than me? Do you love that? And when I think about it now, anyone listening is going to go, what? But it was really, really severe, that childlike need. Wow. And so what my mum would do, though, is she knew that he needed feeding every 4 hours, and I had no natural inclination to pick up this child. I didn't hate the child. I didn't want anything to happen to it. It was just like, why is this child here? And she would and she would make me every 4 hours, because obviously I couldn't breastfeed. And so we went and got the bottles. And I remember we had this flat in North London with a very long 35-foot lounge, which led into the kitchen. And it was like the Green Mile, because it was like climbing Everest just to walk to the kitchen, how I felt. And I used to say, I never could say I felt suicidal. I just wanted someone to give me an injection to make the pain, make it stop. And she would make me walk up to the bottles, do the bottles, and physically hold him and feed him every 4 hours. And I think that was so important, because I wouldn't have even had that physical bond. As a baby, he just knew that he was being cuddled by his mom.
Yeah.
And so talking about did you bond, I did, and then it was taken from me.
How long did this period last?
I would say it started to when I was medicated, which I'm a huge believer in antidepressants when they are given for the right reasons, not just because someone dies, not just because you break up with your boyfriend. This is for clinical depression.
Yeah.
And so I started to see the wood for the trees, the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'd have good days and then a few bad ones, and gradually, that's been kind of the same for years. Wow. And I'm so lucky that we are Matty and
It's
I,
great
we
that you have a
great
relationship. That's so nice, considering the start of it.
And then when I had Louis, things were very different.
Were you scared to have another child?
12 years.
Yeah, I was about to say.
12 years.
I'd be terrified if that was your... And did you feel when you had him, were you in a good place when you had him? Or did you think, I'm just going to have another child?
I didn't plan to get pregnant, but I knew that I had a strong feeling. I was 43 when I had... I
didn't realize, wow.
I was 43 when I had Louis. I was then obviously thrilled. But I can't say I had postnatal depression. I was fine when I had him, and then he was very sick. So he was taken into hospital with Hirschsprung disease, but I had bonded immediately. What about you? Because you've got 4 children now.
Yeah. I just, by the way, listening to your story, I have so much, I've obviously have friends that I've talked about the fact that they've had postnatal depression, but they've never really described it in that way. And I feel such sympathy for women that go through that.
They don't talk about it. And I'm not taking anything away from mums, but there are some people who will say, oh, I had that for 4 days after the baby was born. And I get that they felt baby bluish, but they don't really understand what proper postnatal depression is.
That's terrifying. Yeah. That's really terrifying. I'm sorry.
Did you have anything?
With Teddy, I remember when I gave birth to her, I got very scared. Like, I remember it was like if I was carrying her downstairs, I could be like, oh my God, she could just fall out of my arms and be on the stairs. Or there'd be a fire going, I remember. And I'm like, what if she just falls into the fire? And I was like, turn the fire off. I remember being very anxious, like in a very height. It was like the opposite of everything I wanted to happen. It was like all my fears were just playing out. Like, what if a car is coming and she's just, right in front of the car, like all these horrible, it was like almost making me crazy for a bit, the amount of anxiety, or just checking on her with actually all 4 of my children. I think the very first year, I would constantly check on them in the night to make sure they were breathing.
Holding the mirror, the breathing.
Yeah, because I had a friend or 2 that had lost their child like that. And I knew that statistically, once they clear the year mark, they're out of the woods for that. So for the first year of all of my kids' lives, checking in the night, not sleeping.
When Teddy was born and put in your arms, did you have the immediate bonding love?
Yeah, I did have the immediate bonding love. I didn't experience anything like you're experiencing, except for the deep fear. I know when I was pregnant with Charlie, I went through the thought of, because I was so in love with Teddy, I thought, oh my God, what if, can I love him as much? What if I don't, what if I don't love him as much? Because how can I
imagine loving anybody more than that child.
And then he came, and there he was, and it was just me and him in this world for that moment. Because Teddy was, and I was just totally and utterly besotted with him. And it was a completely different experience of profound love where it just grew. I think with Coco and Bo, what was tricky for me, where I was really nervous and scared, was because I had Coco and Bo via surrogate. And I remember being very nervous about what that would feel like and feeling kind of less than. And I remember I had a friend who was pregnant at the same time, and I felt deep shame that she got to be pregnant and I wasn't, even though I was having a baby 3 months before her. I didn't go to any maternity shops.
It's interesting talking about it as shame.
I felt like it was a failure on my behalf, and I felt like I didn't have the right to celebrate. Like with Teddy and Charlie, I got baby clothes beforehand, but I didn't for Coco. I didn't feel like I had the right to do that until she was here. And then I remembered when our surrogate was delivering, it's quite amazing, actually. I had this really beautiful, profound moment where I delivered Coco, both Coco and Bo, but I delivered her out of our surrogate with my own hands, looking at another woman who's sharing the most beautiful journey you can, in a true sisterhood, motherhood moment that is so powerful. I couldn't begin to describe it. But when I delivered Coco, I remember I put her immediately, they clean you up, I immediately did skin to skin with my top off and had her there. And I remember Coco was rooting around and she latched.
Looking for your boob.
Yeah, and I let her on because I wanted her to have that. But I remember feeling, again, that embarrassment and shame that there was no milk for her, because with Teddy and Charlie there was, and I breastfed, and with Coco I couldn't. And I felt I felt sad that I couldn't do that for her.
Did you have the immediate love?
Yes.
Because you must have slightly worried about
I did.
that again,
I was so worried.
You hadn't gone through the
I kind of felt like a
pregnancies.
bit like how a dad must feel like at the beginning.
Yeah, because I was
like,
going to say, we talk about mums bonding, but
Yeah.
sometimes dads find it very
think,
hard.
Well, for Rob, I think with Coco, I think with all our children, he was kind of like, okay, for a bit, you know, he loved them, but I don't think till he started doing things, he was, you know, Rob's life continued as it was. He didn't get up in the night. He didn't, you know, maybe he changed a poopy nappy every now and then. But, you know, like, I think when I gave birth to Teddy, Rob went to work the next day. He had something with James Corden, and then he went to the gym for 3 hours. I was like, what?
What?
You know what I mean? Like, you know, so I think for guys, it's different, you know, but because I was a mother coming from a different angle, you know, I was getting up in the night and doing the feeds. It was a different experience, but it ended up being really beautiful in a completely unexpected way. You know, we talk about these different journeys to motherhood, and this isn't a journey I ever thought I would have. And, you know, life happened the way life happened, and that's the way our journey happened with Coco and Bo. And, you know, I'm so grateful to God, grateful to our surrogate, grateful to medicine, grateful for all of it, you know, because I look at these two incredible beings that I love with like my entire soul. And I just feel so blessed that they're here. And if it weren't for that, they wouldn't be here. And honestly,
did you have the same surrogate for both?
I had the same surrogate for both. I wouldn't have done it with anyone else. And it was a punt. And I just felt like we had Bo and he was waiting for us. And I didn't know if it would happen or not. And when it did, I just honestly, the journey I had with them was such a beautiful journey and such a, you know, it was a different journey. But I just look at those two little beings and I just, honestly, I'm so grateful. And they, and there's no difference in my love between any of them. No.
It's interesting when we hit on the dad thing, because Tim obviously, you know, of course, initially bonded with Matty and loved him. But then when I got poorly, I didn't have the energy or the inclination to even change a nappy. And I felt that I had such shame about how I was feeling. So when Tim was doing so well with those things, I was jealous
that he was
hiding. He was doing things to me, like he would go, "Oh, I'm rubbish at this. Will you come and help?" Because he could see that I was
struggling, and you were feeling.
It was such
Isn't it amazing how much shame we put on ourselves as mother? Like I remember when I was having trouble breastfeeding with Teddy. I mean, it was a real nightmare. She wasn't latching. I got mastitis 3 times. I mean, at one point I was pumping blood. You know, it was awful. It was hard. And I remember thinking, oh, I think I'm going to quit breastfeeding because this is really tough. And I remember emailing one of my best friends, just going, I'm really struggling. I'm on, you know, I've had mastitis now again, and I just don't know. And even my best friend, well, you know, best is breast, and, you know, breast is best, and, you know, you really should. And I remember really buying into that. Wow, you're right. I just keep going. Just keep going.
This breast is best thing drives me mad, because I had a midwife really affect me.
And you really, you know, I think we find all these avenues to feel guilty that you're not enough as a mom. You're not, you know, bonded with your baby enough, or you're not taking care of it well enough.
Everything is the front of a parent and baby magazine.
Yeah. Denise, I've got one more question for you. What advice would you give to someone who maybe feels like they're not bonding enough with their baby?
The thing is, some people say, oh, I didn't realize I had postnatal depression. To me, I was seriously depressed after having a baby. Therefore, I had postnatal depression. But sometimes people don't see it as they need help. And exactly what you were just saying, we have such shame. Every time we go into a shop, we look around and there's Parent and Baby magazine and everybody is smiling
and happy,
and they're all going out. If you feel anything is worrying you, talk to somebody about it. I know it's hard to get an appointment these days. I know it's not just as easy, but honestly, it might be something and nothing. And so, you know, you will always eventually bond with your child. But I think it's so important to quash this and to nip it in the bud as soon as possible. And it's just having the acknowledgement, okay, you're going through this, but there are things that we can do. You need someone to say, you're not the only person going through this because you feel like you are. So it's just, you know, if you talk to a family member, your mum, talk to anybody, but if you can, just see a GP and say, I'm not feeling good. Welcome back. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is the fact that obviously you're married to, you know, superstar Robbie Williams, who I have known for a long time. We have both talked about our battles with addiction. I've talked on Loose Women for years about what it's like to suffer from it. What we hear less about and less from are those people who love and live with people with addiction, because apparently addiction is the third most cited reason for divorce.
Correct.
So I was in a really bad way. I was really, really struggling with depression, and I was self-medicating, and Rob had come out to take that. He wasn't looking after himself. In fact, that, you know, not that I'm not glorifying things, but there are some times that you have so much shame as an addict, you have to kind of flip the narrative sometimes and think, you have to find some humor in things.
Yeah.
And there was once, and I don't know if Rob remembers it, but him and I think we were in the Groucho Club. We got chucked out of there. We went to some other illegal joint somewhere. We got chucked out of there. And I just remember we both woke up on a sofa, fully clothed, I hasten to add.
Thank you.
Fully clothed on a sofa in Notting Hill in a random house. We had no idea where we were, covered in toothpaste.
Wow. I mean, first of all, congratulations on the fresh breath.
Thank you so much.
In the morning, that is not a given.
Minty fresh.
Minty fresh. I think that, I mean, I'm going to go on a limb and I would say that Robbie Williams will remember this.
Right.
Because I dread to think that there was another occasion in which he was
covered in toothpaste.
Yeah. I mean, the man barely brushes his teeth now. So I think
we don't know who the toothpaste culprit was.
The toothpaste bandit. I wonder who it was. There's someone out there who knows.
Well, maybe somebody knows and will come forward.
Maybe they'll come forward.
The question I was going to ask you is, you know, I have a platform like Loose Women where I have been lucky enough to be able to talk openly about my own addiction. Rob has been on this show, you know, and many other platforms to talk about his. But something that I think is never really hit on as much is what it's like for the people who live with addicts. Similarly, the people who live with people with mental illness like depression.
Yeah. And you know, I would say both those things tend to go hand in hand anyway. Because
absolutely, because you're self-medicating.
You're self-medicating.
When you met Rob,
yeah,
how much did you know about his life?
I didn't know really anything about his life, and all I know is the friend that was setting us up said they were convinced that we were going to be a match, and I was like, oh, I don't want to go on a blind date, I can't. And he said, listen, the only thing I'll say is Rob's kind of off the wagon. And I had never met anyone on a wagon. I didn't know that there was a wagon involved. I mean, you know, there were wagons involved in anyone's life routine. And I was like, what does that mean? He goes, well, he's been sober, but he's just kind of off the wagon. I was like, okay, right. That's a vague note. And
did you know who Robbie Williams was?
I did not know who Robbie Williams was. Even once I met Robbie Williams on our date, he had to kind of show me Nebworth to prove he was a pop star. And then I was like, okay, buddy, I get it. You're famous. And then I didn't even know what Angels was. And they kept talking about Angels. And I had to go, what is Angels? And then I learned my lesson. Now, obviously, big fan of Angels. But it would have been like a name that sounded kind of familiar. Like I would have known that name maybe. But I would never have been able to pick out what a Robbie Williams looked like in a crowd or what.
And did you know what addiction was?
I did not know. I've obviously heard of addiction.
Of course.
I know alcoholic, drug addict, but there was never anyone in my close proximity, no friends, no relatives that had ever struggled with substance abuse. So to me it was like that's why it felt like such a weird term. It's like I'd heard, I'm like, off the wagon, on the wagon. It was like all very vaguely familiar vernacular, but it didn't mean anything to me. And then obviously I came face to face with it on our first date, and it was very clear to me that what an addict was, and it was quite scary. Yeah.
How did that manifest in him on your first date then? Because you would have thought that, you know, you might have looked for the exit sign straight away.
I should have looked for the exit sign.
18 years later, though, you've still not found the exit.
No. You know, first of all, what I didn't know, and Rob is very, I think he's pretty open about this. I don't know what juice I'm spilling. Basically, there were some pills he had taken prior to my arrival that I did not know about, right? Because I think he was sleeping with this drug dealer, this woman. She'd been around. I don't know. But I was not into him when we first, but they hadn't taken him into effect. So he seemed very normal to me. He was just odd. The house was dark. There was no connection.
Was this in his house?
This was in his house. I thought, this is so weird. And it was quite an interesting first date. And when I tell you, which I cannot even tell you on this, even though we're saying everything, there are some things we're not saying. So I can't give you the total details on the podcast of this first date.
You will after, but not
potentially,
right now. Okay.
Yes. And so anyway, we end up going to this party. I think he's going to ditch me because that's what he said afterwards, when he was planning on ditching me. And my friends were like, that guy's so weird.
And you'd only had like one date.
This is the first date.
Right.
And it was just weird. It was a complete disconnect. And I called my friends and they were like, are you okay? It seemed really weird. Do you want to come back to the party? And I'm like, do you want to go back to the party? And he's like, yeah, let's go back to the party. He's thinking he's going to ditch me. I'm thinking I need some support here because this is a struggle bus. We do not like each other. So I guess because we were so relaxed at that point, because we decided we didn't like each other, on the car ride to the party, very LA, Mulholland Drive, we just started laughing. And we were just laughing. So we didn't care anymore. And so I thought, oh, he's quite funny. And I think he thought in his head, oh, she's quite funny. So we walk into this party, and it's not a big party, but it's clear upon entry that there is imbibing going on.
Okay. And you weren't a big imbiber.
I'm not an imbiber. I was just very happy with my champagne. There was one other person who was happy with her champagne, and the rest were imbibing. And all seemed very normal at first. And we had this moment where we were talking, and much like you and I are sat here, but without microphones. And we started talking, and I guess the noise of the music, it was almost like everyone else disappeared. And we were talking, and in an instant, I knew him my entire life. It was like the universe opened up, and it was like he fully understood me, and I fully understood who he was. It was this very weird moment, which I've never felt in my life before.
Wow, even amidst that kind of chaos.
Yeah, it was like everything went quiet and the universe opened up, and it was like a God shot is the only way I can describe it. It really was like inhaling and the universe expanded, and it was this very pure moment. And it would have been really weird to say, oh my God, did you just feel that? But that's what I felt in my heart. And later, when he told the story a year later, he described that exact moment. I'd never said that to him. And he said, and then there was this moment on the couch.
Yeah, I've heard him say that.
And and I went, oh my God, you felt that. I truly believe in that moment, the universe connected us on a higher plane, and he became my soulmate.
Has there been times, though, Ayda, over 18 years where Rob has relapsed, and you have literally thought, there are children involved in this now?
Yeah.
Do I stay or do I go?
Listen, that night he got messy. Ultimately, I mean, he'll talk about it. He ended up clucking like a chicken. I've never seen a man cluck like a chicken. That was obviously alarming.
Is that a thing that he does when he's...
Apparently, when there is cocaine in the boom boom room, that is...
The chicken comes out.
The chicken comes out. Okay. No, we haven't had any farmyard animal incidents since, but it was scary. But at that moment... It all came, it was like all the information came clicking towards me. Oh my God, this is addiction. This is off the wagon. What is, but I was because I'd had that moment on the couch with him, there was no thought of mine but to just take care of him. I just wanted to get him out of danger. I wanted to bring him home, and I wanted to make sure he was safe. And I wasn't worried he was going to try and get in my pants that first. It was just like that. And normally that would freak me out. I have such a wall that anytime, I would have been scared to go home with someone that I didn't know. And something could happen to me. I'm quite a nervous Nelly in that way. But in that moment, I just wanted to take care of him. And from that moment, that was it. We were together. Inseparable.
I mean, you are known as one of the tightest couples in show business.
Aww,
and when you watch, the Robbie documentary, which was just, fascinating and so raw and so honest, that, like me, he still, even in the good times, he still deals with a lot of demons.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you can probably speak to this, but... you're always an addict.
Yeah.
You don't un-addict. You might not
And you always have depression. You have periods of being okay.
Yeah.
But like with mine recently, after 5 years, I just had an awful breakdown, and I told Rob about it. He said, can we stop having these breakdowns? I said, I really would like to.
I think Rob's mental health is always a fine line. I think in recent years, he's been the best he's ever been. But of course, I'm sure in the back of his mind and the back of my mind is this going to happen again? When is it going to happen? How are we going to navigate it? Now I have kids with this man, so the stakes are even higher, and it's a very vulnerable position. You are always kind of one eye open. I constantly worry, and I worry about you know, if it's not drugs, you know, he's quite good because he'll get just obsessive compulsive about, you know, playing golf or biking or, you know, something really, you know, he went through a metal detecting stage, you know, like he finds these
my son's fiance is going through a metal detecting. She's not an addict, but she's going through a metal detecting phase. Matt bought her one for Christmas.
This is the gateway drug. But, you know, he'll do everything, but it'll be like 12 hours of, you know, metal detecting, or he'll become friends, he'll become part of a BMX forum, you know, and then he'll become obsessed with BMX bikes. So there's always an obsession, you know, and that will never go. There's nothing about Rob that will ever be half measures, you know, and I've learned to accept that, you know, and sometimes it can be frustrating.
But better to be addicted to BMX forums.
100% than, you know, cocaine and strippers. So, which is a different after party. But I am always worried. There have been wobbles in the past, and every time I think, oh my God, is this it? Is this? But I have learned to trust him more and more in the sense that I know no matter what, he's an addict, and there will be trying times with it. But I know deep down that he wants to get well and be well.
He does, yeah.
And what's really reassuring, you know, and it's kind of like what you talk about with Lincoln, is when someone has chosen to get sober and has shown themselves to be capable of getting sober, because it's really, really hard, is that I know he has it in him. He has the tenacity and the fight to do it. So even though I'm always scared about something happening, I remind myself of his will to get better, and I know that's in there.
It's so interesting. I love listening to these stories, and now of course he's got 4 wonderful children who are there as a reminder of how important it is to do his best.
Do you in your sobriety journey, do you have, like, do you think you could go back to where you were, or do you know in your heart of hearts that...
I think that my life is so much better in every way. We never, ever, ever, the pair of us, take our sobriety for granted, because, as you will know, it's not just our lives that are enriched with sobriety. It is the ripple effect it has on the other people who love you. Yeah. And my kids are both, you know, flying, doing well, and they would not be living the lives they are living now if I was still drinking and using, you know. And I have a lot of shame related to some of the things that Matty heard and saw. We've had a come to Jesus talk about that, and we're okay now. Louis less so, because he was 9. Yeah. But sobriety is to me the bedrock of our marriage, which is, as you know, a very, very happy one. Ayda, if someone is struggling with their partner who is, you know, has maybe relapsed or is really struggling their addiction, have you got any advice about what they should do?
I mean, I absolutely found Al-Anon very helpful. That's the kind of sister brother program to AA. It's for family members and friends of those affected with addiction. And I have to say that I went to those meetings quite regularly, and I found a community of people. And even though we came from completely different walks of life, we all shared these huge commonalities. And it was very reassuring to be in a community of people who had been affected by addiction, and to listen to the shares, to listen to the stories. It was a place of calm in a storm, and it gave me an understanding about what my partner was going through, and an understanding about how to lay boundaries down for myself and not get lost in that. And it was vital for me, and I recommend anyone, you know, and you can, if there's not a meeting near you, there are phone-ins. You can phone in online. So even if you're on the road or you live in a town where there isn't a meeting readily available, you can still find support and a community there to hold your hand.
There are always support groups. When I had depression, when I had Matty, there was 4 TV channels, nothing online. Now you can Google addiction support in Coventry, post-natal depression help in Birmingham. And to bridge the gap between you and the medical profession, there will always be some support group there to help you. We've got to go to a break now. When we come back, we're going to be lightening the mood a little bit, let's say. Welcome back to part 3 of our first ever Loose Women podcast. Now, we've talked about some juicy, some quite meaty topics there, but we're going to lighten it a little bit. And this is our section that we like to call loose ends. So we've got a cheeky little question to ask each other, but we don't know what that is.
Okay. If you're singing in the shower, what's the song?
You to Me Are Everything by The Real Thing.
Wow, you had that ready.
Because it's my favorite song, and as soon as I hear it, you know, we've got this comedian Peter Kay, you know,
Yeah,
Peter
of
Kay,
course.
and he does that great sketch where there's certain songs you hear and you're dancing onto the dance floor by the time you get there.
Yeah.
So in the shower it would always be You to Me Are Everything. What's yours?
You're So Vain, Carly Simon. Don't know why, but I think my voice sounds really good doing it. Not now, but later.
Do you know who I might be going to see and actually meet in Los Angeles?
Who?
James Taylor.
No
who it's
way.
written about, oh my God, Matty and I's favourite performer. Right, I'm going to ask you your cheeky question.
Oh God,
okay. My friends are always asking me to matchmake. I don't know why, but they just are. I've done it a couple of times. It's been quite successful.
Well, I'm a recipient of a matchmaking.
Absolutely.
So big fan.
So in America, they've got that millionaire matchmaker with Patty Stanger.
Patty
Stanger.
Come on, we watch the same programs.
Absolutely.
We know.
So if I'm the Patty Stanger, okay, before she does the mixes, and obviously it's about personality and everything, taking the millionaire bit out of it, because obviously Robbie's not doing too bad.
Okay.
So the question is, take your husband out of the equation.
Okay, Rob's out of the equation.
Who is your ultimate celebrity one night stand? Not relationship, one night stand.
Just a shag. And Rob's okay with this as me answering this. He's not. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. We don't really care. So,
I'm gonna go with. I think I'll just go with the Hemsworth. I think I'll go with Chris Hemsworth. I'll go with Thor, the one that's Thor.
You'll go with Chris, not Liam?
Chris is the one that's Thor, isn't he?
Chris
Liam's
is
the
Thor.
younger one. I want
Liam's
Thor.
younger.
I want Thor. I want a mighty god.
You want a mighty
Thor.
god to pick you up.
Yeah.
Now, you see, that's where they'd start. So you might not end up with Thor.
Oh, so I'm not getting Thor in the mixer?
Well, no.
Who's Patty giving me?
They would.
Am I getting Brad Pitt? Like, who's at the party?
They would start with Thor, but you might end up with Danny DeVito.
Well, that's
not
not okay.
You don't know.
Well,
but
no, then I'm going home by myself. And by the way, I love Danny DeVito.
So do I. And
he would keep me very happy on the personality front. I just don't know that I want to shag Danny DeVito. Is that okay?
No, but he'd probably laugh you into bed.
Maybe
That's
he
the whole
would.
thing.
Maybe he would.
You know, because there's some guys who are so good looking.
Who's in my mixer then?
Well,
because I thought I had the pick of the litter on that one, but if Thor is not there,
it just gives her a starting point.
Okay, so if I said Thor,
the thing is, if there's a room
who's at
full
your
of
mixer?
Thors,
okay, so Lincoln's out. He's you know.
I mean, mine are very predictable. They'd probably be Idris,
Elba.
Elba,
That's a good one.
And I would say Bradley Cooper.
Oh, that's a good.
It's got to be people
I have a friend
who would be
that's
naughty and would lift
been
you
with
up.
the BC. I have a friend that's been with the BC. Can't
Really?
say names, obviously.
Oh,
wow.
So listen, if you've enjoyed it, we want you to
They have,
follow.
by the way.
They have.
They've
and
loved it.
subscribe.
They've loved every minute of it.
It will cost you nothing. It's totally free.
Oh my God, it's free?
Totally free, and you'll never miss an episode.
You can not sign up. Is this the part where we mentioned that we're going to be doing this every Friday, that there's going to be a pair of loose ladies every single Friday leading these Q&As in this podcast, which honestly, all bets are off. Completely any question you want, which is frightening for us, I would say, especially for you, Denise. I have nothing to hide. But, you know, please send in your burning questions. And by that, I mean, go as deep as you want to go. Because actually, at that point, we're already off the podcast. So those questions won't be directed at us, right?
And it's going to be two different girls every time you see it as
every
well.
Friday. And everything's in the show notes. So you can get all the info if you just check it out. But honestly, this is the moment to ask the questions that may be off topic for daytime television. So please send in your questions, dilemma, burning desires to
loose.women at itv.com. So from Ayda and me, see you soon and
stay
loose.